Well, I think we had an excellent caucus. The chairman of the Transportation Committee, I know he'll speak in a few minutes, had the opportunity to talk to the caucus. While there's still some details left to be negotiated between the House and Senate, so we didn't hand out a bill. I know will probably be a question, but we talked about the concept of doing tolls for trucks only in the state of Connecticut, and it was very well received by the caucus. Now, I will say there was many in the caucus that are very disappointed that we're not moving forward with a car and tolling plan altogether. I feel very comfortable based upon the conversations and the conversations we've had over the last 3 years about our transportation infrastructure, that we're in a position to move Connecticut forward and end this debate once and for all. It's very clear what our priorities are as a caucus. Our priorities are to move Connecticut forward, both in economic development, and to have good economic development, we need to have good roads and a good transportation structure. And we also want to move Connecticut forward in higher education and keeping our young people in the state. We talked about that this morning, and you're saying, how does that relate to transportation? Well, it does. Our young people want to stay in the state. We need the jobs to get them here. Every dollar we spend on transportation, we're going to get $3+ out and into our economy. So I feel very comfortable that we're in a good position. Again, a few things left to be negotiated. Some disappointed caucus members because they really did want to go a lot further than we're going. But we feel comfortable as soon as the Senate comes out this afternoon, they have the votes, they pass it through the Senate, we will be ready to act and send it to the governor's desk.
Yeah, I think too that we talked a little about the history of this issue for some of our members who are newer in their last term or two. This debate is not new. It's been around the state of Connecticut for 5, 6, 7, 8 years now, going back to Representative Guerrero and Rocky Hill. And we made the point that if it was so easy to solve the transportation problem, it was so easy to do this infrastructure plan, why has it not happened when everyone agrees how critical it is? And we talked about the other plans out there. The House Republicans did not offer a plan. They said they would make budget cuts. Where's that list? Joe and I have said we'd engage anytime and look at it. They've offered no list of budget cuts to pay for anything. The other plan, more thought out, reasoned, was from Senator Fasano and his caucus, which was to drain the rainy day fund. That had no votes and no support in our caucus to take $1.5 billion out. So it's also totality. You can't look at things in isolation. You have to look at the history of it, look at where we've been, where we are today. No alternative plan that works. This is where we settled. And even in our own caucus, there's a settlement and meeting halfway to do this. It will make, as the speaker said, provide revenue for low-interest federal loans, which we all agree is critical and necessary to do this. It will lead to $20 billion of infrastructure improvements. When the economy does hit a recession, which it probably will in the next 10 years or 5 years, maybe sooner, we will be putting people to work at an alarming rate compared to where we are now on construction projects. Those are good things, and we think our caucus supports that.
And to that matter, we did enter into the discussions at the governor's residence and then beyond that with the other side of the aisle. And they've essentially deemed themselves irrelevant. They said there was no plan moving forward that they were comfortable with if it had anything to do with tolling. They talk about these phantom cuts when I refer to the nearly 6 months we spent off in that room trying to come up with $400 million, yet we're miraculously supposed to come up with $1 billion in cuts with no plan in writing, nothing to evaluate. So they deem themselves irrelevant, and we're going to move forward with a plan that moves Connecticut forward. One of the things I wanted to talk about too is the honesty with the public. It's got to stop all these accusations of past acts by the legislature in what we're going to do moving forward, secret meetings. It really does beat up on the trust that people should have in their government, and it doesn't help us. They talk about us misappropriating the STF even this year. We all know that didn't happen. It did not happen. We changed the structure, but we never went in and took the money out. Representative Rojas is here today. Being on the Finance Committee as long as I have been, we've actually put more money into the STF, and we changed the gross receipts to be strictly for the STF. We've taken more proactive measures than any other legislature before us. So we have to be honest about what we're talking about, and this is not a cars tolling plan. This is a trucks only tolling plan, and the details in the bill will ferret that out. And in that aspect, the chairman of the Transportation Committee.
Yeah, I think we had a great conversation today about what the future of Connecticut looks like when you can invest in your transit infrastructure the way our surrounding states have. It's not a secret that our business leaders, our institutes of higher education, our communities are saying, can we invest in our roadways, in our rail, in our bus systems, in our bike and ped systems. That's what cities across the country are doing. We're struggling with like how we grow in Connecticut. Where can we put the right investments to ensure that we are a vibrant, active, attractive place for businesses and residents to grow and locate? And we know core investments in transportation are the leading way to make our communities safe, strong, and attractive. We've got that opportunity right now. The federal loan programs are really attractive. The loan terms are really easy for us to take advantage of and to ensure that we're making the right investments immediately once we get this bill passed. 12 bridges across the state of Connecticut, trucks only, and large trucks only. We're going to be in a position to make the investments that we need to make to move Connecticut forward.
Well, since we're talking about honesty, what day is this all going to happen? Obviously, you're not going to do it on Tuesday because of the special election in 3 districts. So,
2 districts.
Three districts?
No, January 21st is the third.
Oh, yeah, the third.
Oh, that's right. So there's only 2 on the 14th.
Correct. I'm very locked in on that.
You wouldn't want to have a session that day. So what day?
By the time we write the bill up, there has been no official drafting of the bill. We have maybe bullet points the chairman, the House chair, and the Senate chair have. Getting them together, having the LCO drafted will take some time. I still think we're looking at the middle of January to the end of January, some point in time in there.
Are the financial pro formas that the administration put out in December still relevant, or has there been tweaking that's go ahead.
Yeah, I think they've changed, and our caucus asked for that this morning too, so we'll be getting that together. Because the size of the trucks, we're ruling out buses, the box trucks will be excluded. It's more of the large 18-wheelers, and maybe you could answer a little bit more on that.
The plumbers, the electricians, right? We didn't. That was not what we meant, and so that had to come out as well or clarified it. So.
Yeah, trucks are all categorized into different classes. In a lot of trucks that people are concerned about were these class 4, class 5 trucks. And we wanted to make sure that those were not going to be tolled in any way. So the structure of our conversations now is, a much larger scale, whether it's 18-wheelers, not your traditional box trucks at the local
To what
delivery
extent does
man
that shrink the revenue that will come in?
It does. It does shrink the revenue.
Can you give us some sense of
150 to 200 ballpark.
was what will produce gross, and then there's a net because there's expense to do the system? I mean, that was in
Yeah,
the original.
I think that's fair, and we're still modeling that out. But I think we're looking at 150, 175 factory
And
pay.
the
In
rate
revenue.
is lower for
In
18-wheelers?
gross revenue.
Gross.
And the rate is lower for
Sorry, net
18-wheelers
revenue.
that
Sorry,
are
net
based in Connecticut? Is that right?
What's that?
The rate
Is there
is
in-state
lower for
discount for the
18-wheelers based in Connecticut?
If you have an Easy Pass system that's Connecticut based, you can have a lower rate.
Which means out-of-staters can buy them, just like they do in Massachusetts.
Yeah, we have to comply with federal law on that.
Mr. Speaker, I had a question for you. You mentioned just a few minutes ago that there were members in your caucus who support expanding it in trucks and cars. And that's got to be a tough sell. Even tolls on trucks are going to be a tough sell. What kind of backlash do you think that Democrats will face in an election year in a climate where
I don't. I absolutely do not. I think the people of the state of Connecticut are sick and tired of us not dealing with the issues that the state faced. I will say under my watch as Speaker, we've addressed the spending cap, we've addressed the bonding cap, we did the revenue cap, we've tackled the pension liabilities more so than any other administration, and now we're going to finally tackle the transportation issue that's been plaguing the state for almost 20 years. I would say this is a legislature of action, and there will be no repercussions, because to stand up and just say, oh, we can solve this problem another way, just doesn't work anymore. Put something in writing, put a plan, be willing to vote. I said into caucus, and I'll say right now, when I first got elected, my mother always told me, you'll win some votes, you'll lose some votes. You may win an election, you may lose an election. But in the end, you have to be able to look in the mirror and say, what I did was the right thing to do. And I genuinely believe it's the right thing to do for the state. And my caucus is willing to take a tough vote to do the right thing and deal with the one issue. Well, there's two. I talked about the higher education and economic development and transportation. We plan on dealing with this in with the transportation in special session, and then we're going to continue on with the economic development.
And the idea, Susan, that would be the only issue in the election. I mean, look, I can tell you right now, this side of the aisle has a lot of members who don't believe in climate change. A lot of members who want to roll back the Sandy Hook gun protections. They file amendments. They want to restrict a woman's right to choose. We're going to tell that story too in November.
Republicans have a plan. They do.
What plan? The
for
House
transportation.
Republicans
Well, they
don't
don't
have
have
a
a plan, but the Senate Republicans
Senate
have a
does,
plan.
the House does not.
Senate does, and it's talking about draining the rainy day fund. And what happens when the rainy day fund is drained? And everybody tells us it's not if a recession comes, but rather when. History tells us it will come. Are you going to then defund public education? Are you going to defund higher education? Are you going to defund senior services? The state of Connecticut, they say, oh, there's other cuts out there, but produce a list. We went from 52,000 state employees down to 42. We went down to 80-plus agencies, down to 50 some. The governor's continuing to look for more efficiencies. So where is this miraculous savings coming from? They talk about the pensions. Well, the pensions for new state employees is a hybrid plan. It's a 401k and a defined benefit. The liability is with the already retired workers. Are you going to go out and try to change constitutional law to take away benefits from somebody already retired? No, but it's a great talking point that they can use. It's based in zero reality. So when they have a plan, you have specific cuts, and tell me what you're willing to do when the recession hits, we can have a conversation. But their famous line of kicking the can down the road, you're just going to sit and hope a recession doesn't come? That really is penny wise and pound foolish.
The Democrats have come out with plans. They had two, actually. The first was to borrow billions of dollars solely paid for by state taxpayers when we already have a lot of debt that we've incurred over the years. And the second one was to drain the rainy day fund. If we had done that, or Marty or Bob or the governor would have done it, I can't imagine the headline screaming. It would have been it would have been saying typical Democrats. The fact that they did it shows they never really, again, the Senate Republicans worked hard on their plan. The House ours, at some point, did the same thing in the budget. They never had a budget. Voters cannot forgive you for just simply yelling no in inaction. You have to have ideas that convince people to vote for you. They have not done that.
Did
Joe,
you do an
I had
actual?
a question. I just wanted to be clear. In other words, you said there were some questions left, if I heard you correctly,
Yeah.
and you said the final bill clearly has not been drafted. I think you said there wasn't even a working draft. Are you saying flat out here that you do have the votes and this will pass? I just want to be clear on that.
I feel very comfortable is the way I termed it, and I still feel very comfortable. There are always additional questions that come up. We pitched a lot to the caucus this morning. We talked about a lot of issues. Typically what happens is they're going to go home, they're probably going to read, they're going to pick up the financials, and there'll be additional questions. So I still feel very comfortable, but yes, there's questions out there still to be discussed. The oversight board to ensure that the projects are done in a way and the dollar amount that we all feel comfortable is something many of the caucus members talked about. I know we're still having those discussions. So yeah, there's some questions left to be answered. There's the finality of the bill actually being written up and getting the bill in their hands so they could read it. But I still feel very comfortable that we can move forward.
Did you?
How
Chris,
close is
one thing is,
sorry.
and also bonding is we don't want to forget that. I think
Right.
The speaker and I and Jason heard this and Roland heard this, that's been tied up because of money that would go and geo bonding for transportation, but there's also affordable housing. There is grants to urban areas for brownfield remediation. There are things that they're not connected, but we got to make sure that the governor's also understands how important that is to our caucus.
Did you
Is
do an
that
actual
wrapped
vote
up?
count?
Is this a
No.
No.
two-bill package?
No.
The bond package is not wrapped up. Okay, so you're talking exclusively here today only on the toll bill. The bond package is where?
The bond package is something that we have to get done sooner rather than later. We have municipalities that are waiting for their salt and sand money.
Yeah.
And those projects need to be
Is
forward. We have
part
to
of
get
your,
that funding done.
the apparent reticence here not to say that you have the votes to pass this towing plan is because you're waiting on the Senate?
No.
I mean,
I
you
said
know-
all along, I said in the.
Well, you said at the beginning that if the Senate goes, we'll pass it too.
No, I feel very comfortable that the support is here. This is a scaled back plan, both in what it brings in and where the tolls are going. I felt very confident I could pass the old tolling bill. So this, for me, is an easier vote. I think it is for the majority members of our caucus, so I feel very comfortable.
If you can't pass this tolling plan, then can any tolling plan pass this legislature? I mean, is this it?
Look, I know we can pass it. I feel very comfortable in passing it, but I would never want to presume anything about a future legislature. Things change very rapidly. All it requires is look, and I hate to put it this way, when I was first elected, the Sportsman Caucus was very, very powerful here up at the legislature. The Second Amendment folks were very, very powerful up here at the legislature. Many years there was opportunities to change the law, but people just didn't have the political will to do it. Unfortunately, we all lived through what happened in Newtown, in Sandy Hook specifically, and then we gathered the political courage to come in and do that. And make common sense gun regulation laws here in the state of Connecticut. I don't want it to happen when it comes to transportation. I don't want us to continue to pick 18-wheelers over the people of the state of Connecticut. That's what we're talking about here. We're talking about 18-wheelers that do over 9,000 times the damage to our roads, and we're having a public debate whether we're gonna make our roads safe for others. It's a silly discussion. We just need to move forward.
What if it
How will the
slides past February 5? Will you take it up in the regular session?
I'll take it all the way up until I'm no longer serving, if it's up to me. This is a priority.
How will the legislation address the legal challenge that is already ongoing in Rhode Island and is certain here, that if this is a system that's not going to begin collecting money till 2023, correct? But there's no guarantee the litigation will be resolved. So how is that will be addressed in the, go ahead.
I think the governor's office is hopeful it might be resolved, and Rhode Island will certainly be resolved by then. Very similar issues. The second thing is our understanding, and this is something that I learned in the last couple of days, the Rhode Island lawsuit that is filed is not seeking damages or the money to be reimbursed to them. They're simply looking to stop it and make that prospective. So those things have to be flushed out, but there's no question, and I think I said this before, we will make sure that we are not collecting all this revenue to pay off a loan and then in 2026 somehow jeopardize the state with a court ruling. We'll be very cautious about that. We'll handle it. We'll handle the cash flows that way. It's only 180 million. You could maybe stretch in the geo on the earlier side. The number runs will reflect our cautious approach to dealing with the lawsuit that we have no doubt we will win, but we have to, we're also at the same time not reckless, and we'll make sure we structure that the right way.
How long would it take to put the tolls up? Sorry.
I think everything we've heard, and Roland, maybe you can answer that, talking about the time frame until
The
the
time
taxes
frame,
are up.
yeah,
Because now we're talking a smaller amount also.
right.
Yeah, so when we looked in the past few months over what the gantry system would look like compared to the statewide system, moving to 12 is much easier. You don't have to dig the statewide channels that you had to dig for the 52 interconnected models. The 12 gantry locations, much easier. They're collecting just from the truck, so the sophistication of the software isn't as hard because you're not doing the different types of plate readers. It's much easier. It still takes about 18 months to enter into those contracts, to get the system up and running, to test the system. You're still talking 18 months from once you sign the contract.
From passage.
But
And your
will
hope
this-
is that the lawsuit in Rhode Island comes to some kind of conclusion in that?
Yeah, that's our hope. But I don't think anyone's
it's
that
ideal,
concerned about that case. Again, to me, if violating interstate commerce, one of the arguments I've heard is that's going to add prices to goods. New York charges $100 off peak for an 18-wheeler to go over their bridge. Our $8 one time a day is going to have a major impact on the price of goods in the eastern region. It's nonsensical.
That's
Sorry,
what you're
Roland,
saying,
I don't think
$8 a
you
day,
got a chance
no
to
more?
answer
I'm giving a
That's
hypothetical.
that's ballpark in comparison.
18 months is after you have passed it and put out an RFP.
Yeah.
And gone through that
So
whole
DOT feels
process.
about 18 months would be what it takes.
And that'll probably take a year.
I mean, I think they're ready to go. I mean, I think we could be out with an RFP relatively soon.
There's certain permitting that has to happen at the federal level. That's really the only wild card that's out there.
Will this be done on a project by project basis? Could we end up with a system where the feds say, no, you can't toll that bridge project, or, well, actually, you could, but I'm sorry, you're not gonna get a TIFIA loan for that project because we don't have any money. So how is this actually gonna work? You're gonna get federal funding for all 12 projects? Is this gonna be done in piecemeal, and what's the implications of that?
Yeah, I will say a lot of credit needs to go to the governor's staff. I know Ryan Jasowitz spent a lot of time down in DC. He even opened it up to caucus leaders to go down there and have those honest conversations with the Department of Transportation and the federal authorities. So a lot of what we're proposing has already been vetted, is either done in other states or proposed to be done in other states. So we feel very comfortable moving forward. I guess there is a slight definition thing of urban area and suburban area, but given our proximity to both New York and Boston, it seems like we're more in a suburban area anyway. So the rates will be, as the governor and his staff have put out there. They did a lot of work. This isn't something to where they didn't get what they wanted in the legislative session, so they just sat back waiting. There was many trips, many phone calls, many conference calls to try to get additional information from the federal authorities, so we wouldn't have that problem to where we'd enact something that the federal government would then say, no, it doesn't meet our criteria. So we're trying to be proactive instead of reactive.
Whoa, wait a minute, what does that mean? Does it mean it's possible that there won't be 12 It could be less than 12?
No, we are going with a bridge, tolling specific project-specific tolling, yes.
And can you tell us, do you
It's for that project, though, let's be clear. If you're collecting on the Q Bridge, it's going to the Q Bridge. If you're collecting on the Mixmaster, it's going to the Mixmaster.
It's going to the specific one that you're paying it for.
That's right.
Remember, you're entering into federal loan agreements for a certain amount of money for projects that have to be done. So it's all rolled into one. You can't sort of say we're going to do this. It's all one package that they're going to apply for. It's a $20 billion,
How
19
confident are you with the reduced revenue from doing trucks only as opposed to pulling all cars and trucks that you could still qualify for those federal grants because it is supposed to be a dedicated revenue stream to pay those?
Yeah, so it's a dedicated revenue stream to the project to which it is. And if the money is collected on the Mixmaster, for instance, it's going to the Mixmaster, so we believe we qualify for that.
Last question.
Yes, but you can pledge additional, it's not just, you can pledge additional revenues. We have other STF revenues that can be pledged to help offset it. You can even do a general fund revenue pledge. They don't love that, but they would accept it. So we have multiple layers of revenue we can pledge.
And whether
Case-
New
Just
York
a quick,
retaliates in
just a
Westchester,
quick
take
follow-up.
that one.
You've got the sales tax money, and I get your point, you're right. We didn't reduce it, it's always going up. It just always hasn't grown as fast as we thought. If though, over the next few years, whether it's recession or something else, it doesn't grow as fast as you plan, if you don't grow it by tens of millions in dollars each year, that'll be hundreds of millions in less bonding every year, and you won't get close to the $20 billion figure Matt talked about. My point is, do you think the legislature is committed, when times get tough, to keep their hands off the sales tax money and let it grow in the future like they haven't in the past?
I will say it's impossible for any sitting legislature to bind the hands of a future legislature, so I don't know what they'll decide. I know while we're here, it's our obligation to the people of the state of Connecticut to have a transportation system that is not only safe, but also allows them to move around the state of Connecticut to their jobs, have us move goods, and have us be more economically viable than we currently are. And that is our obligation to the voters, and that's the obligation we want to fulfill when we vote on this toll. Thank you.
Use the phrase, last question, use the phrase very comfortable. Does very comfortable mean 80 votes, 85 votes? Very comfortable would not mean 77 votes, correct?
So I will say very comfortable, and me avoiding predicting is a good thing, because when I predict, I usually go the other way. So thanks.
All right, no